I believe that storytelling has the power to transform our lives in the most fascinating and unexpected ways. Over my career as a journalist and social entrepreneur, I met individuals whose passion and values are making this world a better place. I am Elizabeth Filippouli, and I invite you to hear the stories of some amazing, inspirational people.
I would like to take you back to your childhood years, because this conversation is very much about the things, the people, the experiences, the moments that influenced you from your very young age. Would you like to talk to us about, your family? Where did you grow up?
Yeah, actually, really interesting kind of upbringing. So I was Egyptian. I'm 100% Egyptian. My mom and dad had gone to the US from Egypt to study. And my dad was a professor, and I grew up in a really small college town. And really, my family upbringing was being Muslim in America, was bringing sort of like the Egyptian culture and the American culture blended in one. And inside the four walls of our house was Egypt. The rules, the language, the music, the food, everything in the house was very much about Egypt culture. The minute you opened the door, you were in America. So the American lifestyle and all the things that have to do with like living in the States. So growing up, my parents didn't grow up in the States, so they didn't know about prom and homecoming and sleepovers and all of those things. I really had to really educate my parents about this is part of American culture. And my dad was like, wait, you're going to sleep over at somebody else's house? I'm like, yeah, it's a slumber party. That's what they do. They get together and they watch movies and do these things. So really just learning how to, navigate that and understanding like how we really wanted to stay centered and focused on our culture and where we came from. And really, explaining to people in Minnesota, what is Ramadan and what is fasting and how do those things work. And it became obviously very mainstream now, but I'm talking in, the 70s where it really wasn't that mainstream. Grew up in a really cute college town where in the summers it would be sleepy, and then in the school year it'd be a vibrant college city. My dad was the dean of the business school at that university, so it was really fun going to campus and going to work with daddy and understanding really how the education system worked and how education and being on a college campus was really part of my everyday life. While my dad would grade papers, I would go sit in his office and wait for him to do that after school and on weekends. So really loved being part of a small town in Minnesota and a college town at that.
That little girl back then, did she have a figure, I don't know, woman or a man or someone that she was looking up to, that she was admiring, and she wanted to grow up to be like him or her?
Yeah, back then I didn't really think of a role model or someone that's a female that I was really looking up to at that time. But I do remember looking up at certain jobs and certain people that had certain skills that I was like, that's cool. I want to do that. So I was always fascinated by reporters that were standing on location, telling something on the front lines. Like I was fascinated with the news since I was a little girl, like seeing someone tell a breaking news story, or it was a global correspondent or someone on the front lines of a war or a big business story. Like I have vivid memories of the storytellers, the people that were bringing us the news. They were trusted, they were credible, they were the people that I really was like attracted to. Like I want to understand what's behind that story, what's behind the telling of the news, what did the reporter have to go to bring me that story. So that's like a very vivid memory of me when I was growing up, when I was in grade school and in high school. And I ended up building a career in storytelling and news because I was just so attracted to how things got delivered. And when I was in college, I ended up getting an internship at a news station, and I was in the newsroom. And it was like I had the fever. Like it was like, this is where the magic happens. Information comes into the newsroom before it goes out to the public. And that process of getting something over the wire and getting the information and knowing it first before it was told to the public just thrilled me to no end. And so really understanding that process and thinking about what did I look up to when I was little, it was that.
Do you remember the first story that kind of struck you, or I don't know, what was the first story that you covered or you reported on? At what age?
It was funny. So I did work for like my high school newspapers. I don't really remember what I covered for that, but, or like the yearbook, but I do remember was an internship at this news station. And the first story I happened to get assigned to cover, there was two that were on the same day. Bill Clinton was in town for a convention, Republican or the Democratic convention. And so I got to do like a behind the scenes of how does a venue prepare for security of a presidential candidate, because he was the candidate at the time. And the second story, which was also the same day, was there was a big lottery going on. So people can go to the gas station or convenience store and buy a lottery ticket to win the lottery, to win money. Like you find these pull tabs, these tickets. And the lottery was like at a huge number. And so my job was to go cover the lottery. And I remember doing like my stand-up saying, this ticket could change your life. And then I got to go interview people buying lottery tickets at the 7-Eleven gas station that day saying, what would you do with the money if you won the lottery? So lottery and behind the scenes at a convention hall.
Were you spending time between Egypt and the States? So were you spending the summers in Egypt perhaps, or part of the year there? And I personally love Egypt and the Egyptians, and we're very close. I mean, you know, Egyptians and Greeks, there was a very big Greek community in Alexandria. There is, you know, so much crossover in the culture. And so I always think of Egypt as, you know, first of all, it's one of the most beautiful countries in the world. It's got the world's perhaps most important cultural heritage, so even bigger than the Greeks. And I was wondering, what was Egypt like when you were a child, or when you were in your teens, so you had a better perception of what was going on, and how were you comparing to the two worlds?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, my parents did a really good job of making sure we knew where we came from. So every summer we were in Egypt, visiting family and bonding with our cousins and learning about obviously everything in Egypt. And then Christmas and New Year's, like that time of year when it was freezing in Minnesota, when we could afford it, we'd take an extra trip and go to Egypt during that time, during the Christmas holidays, so we can spend time with our family. And, you know, I remember like the thing about growing up in the US and spending a lot of time in Egypt is the dynamic of the family. Like my first observation was being there was like, all of my friends were my cousins and my cousins' friends. All of my friends were family. Like you really spend all of your time with your family members and extended family members. So uncles and aunts and cousins, that's your family. They don't think of your immediate family as like your mom and dad and your sister or brother. Your immediate family is you, your aunts, your uncles, your cousins, your grandparents. And then that extended family is beyond that, like their cousins and the other people's aunts and uncles. So just like that was like a first observation for me, is like how important the nucleus of the family is to the culture and to the society, and where you get your information from and where you get socialization from was the family dynamic. The second thing is Egypt is a very, history is everywhere you walk around when you're in the city and the country. And so there's a lot of culture there. And so it's always around music and around art and around socializing. And so I love that about Egypt, is that people stay up late and they are always eating and they're always socializing, and live music is a big part of like get-togethers and going to sit somewhere where you can enjoy that. And that would be here in the US, it's like, it's a very occasional thing to listen to live music and go to sit at cafes at the time. And in Egypt is a very normal thing for people to do, is to go sit on the cafe and sit there for hours playing chess or playing backgammon or listening to music or that type of thing.
And come 1997, you decide to move to Egypt and live there and launch your career there, right? How easy or difficult or challenging, or I don't know, must have been a bit emotional to leave the family behind, because precisely, your culture is one that the family is a very closely knit ecosystem. I mean, I know from my own Mediterranean family. So were they easy in letting you go?
Yeah, so I'm 50 now. I grew up in the States, lived here till I was 27, moved to Egypt when I was 27, and I've spent the last 23 years in the Middle East, 15, 16 in Egypt, and the rest in Dubai. And when I moved to Egypt at 27, it's not like I went to high school and college there and I had friends and I had a group. I had my cousins. Like they were, every time I would go to this Egypt, I'd hang out with my cousins or my cousins' friends. So like moving to Egypt wasn't like, it was familiar because I would go there on vacation, but living somewhere and going on vacation are two different things. So when you're going as a professional at age 27, I don't have friends. I have to figure out what kind of job I'm going to get. Like I was moving mostly for personal reasons to go back to Egypt. My mom had multiple sclerosis and I wanted to go back with her and my dad to Egypt. And so I had to find a professional career. I had to look for a job. I knew Arabic, but my Arabic wasn't good. Like I could speak it socially. It's like when you people go to France and they can get by in conversational things, but like you can't do business in that language and feel confident doing it. So it's like I had a lot of disadvantages. Like I had a very American accent, even though I look Egyptian and my name is Egyptian. So I didn't have any friends in professional settings. I didn't have a job. So I had to really overcome a lot. And just learning a new place to live and learning about all the different things that go in a learning curve and moving to what was essence like almost a foreign country for me. Like I was Egyptian, I spoke Arabic, but I had never lived and worked there. So just really the first phase for me was like, what kind of job can I find? I do communications, I do PR. Can I find a job there? And at the time, you either worked for one of the multinational companies in the late 90s. So it was like a P&G, Coke, Unilever, an American company that had multinational operations, or you worked for one of the big family businesses in Egypt. So it was like the Mansour family, the Sawiris family, or the Shitta family. There were three like powerhouse family businesses or the multinationals. So I actually took my stab at one of the family businesses and ended up working for the Sawiris family and one of their businesses and just had a thriving career where I learned so much. And I'm still grateful for Naguib and I'm still very close to him. But really having to make that first step of like, okay, let me cement myself in a new environment with a job that I love to do and try to find a career that I like to do and really build my career. Because when I was in the US, I had worked for several years, but it wasn't like the bulk of my career. And I was just about to embark on that when I got there.
Because you are such a positive person and because you're such a doer, you're just, describing everything as if it's been super easy, which I'm sure it hasn't. And so I would like to invite you to kind of think a bit some of the first, I don't know, not setbacks, but challenges. If you can remember a couple of stories, because people learn from stories and they like to hear, from others, how they manage to overcome obstacles. And so if you can share with us a couple of anecdotes.
Yeah, so first of all, the main reason I moved back was because my mom had MS. She had multiple sclerosis. So I was taking care of my mother who was handicapped, very sick, disabled, unable to feed herself, bathe herself, clothe herself. So I was dealing with an ailing mother and I was trying to help my father take care of my mother. So that was the first thing. The second thing is I had worked in the US for several years before moving to Egypt, but the working environment in the Middle East is very different. In the US, it's very like get things done, results oriented, chop, driven, driver, like get to business, results oriented, got to get to the actions. In the Middle East, all business is personal and it's a much slower pace. You have to build the relationship. You have to invest in that person. You have to get to know their family. You have to, not make small talk, but really invest in talking to them first. They don't want someone to come in and just like, hey, let's get down to business. They want you to talk about how's your family? How are your children? What's going on? Like, so you really need to spend time. And in the beginning, I didn't know that. I just like, I got to get in, I got to get results. I'm going to get things done the American way. That doesn't work. It really doesn't. And when you invest in relationships and you invest in understanding the person that you're doing business with, all good things come from that, because you understand timing, you understand relevance, you understand what's important to them. You think about how you can add value to them. And that's when I really got my first dose and course on how to be a value creator. How do you add value to somebody else? It's not what's important or valuable to you, it's what's important and valuable to them. And I am standing here today as the Chief Value Officer for one of the biggest communications companies in the world. And I chose that title because I built my life on creating value. And I learned it when I went to Egypt. And I learned it when they taught me about how to do business and reap the benefits of slowing down to invest in that relationship and to really create a network in a relationship. It wasn't, about what you know, it's who you know. And how do you, somebody taught me this when I was in Egypt. They were like, okay, Maha, you're new to the region, you're new to Middle East, and, be careful, like who you step on the ladder, who you step on to get up the ladder, because you're going to meet them coming back down. So don't step on people, don't use people, build relationships, because if you use people to get ahead, you will see them on your way back down. And I never forgot that. I never forgot that ladder. I never forgot the relationship component of doing business and how business can come and go, but at the end of the day, the relationship will always be there. People can switch jobs. People can have a lot of different things happen, but really understanding how to create that value is something I really learned early on in my career in Egypt.
So when we met, which was in 2012,
Yep.
you were with Google.
I was
between 97 and what year did you join Google?
At 2010.
So those 13 years, because we tend, people like to stereotype, and we think that, other successful people are overnight successes, or businesses and companies who made it big. It just happened, but it's not. It's accumulation of wins and setbacks, and it's of course having the focus on winning the battle, or the war rather, not the battle. So those 13 years, and what took you to Google?
Yeah, so it's actually a really, it was a relationship that started the whole thing with Google. So I moved to Egypt. I ended up working obviously with Naguib for several years as this family business, building mobile networks in the Middle East, like almost every mobile network, kind of working on getting the license and helping launch it. And then I told Naguib, I really want to go back and do communications. I'd love to do a PR agency. I'd love to bring public relations to the Middle East. And at the time, there was one global PR firm, and there was a really big, sort of like a local mom and pop shop. But like this woman is like one of the trailblazers, one of the first people ever to do PR in Egypt. So I said, I really want to go back to doing PR, which is what I did in the US. Like, I've been doing different activities for this family business, but I really love communications and storytelling and all about reputation management and defining how people do PR and how they differentiate between ad agencies, because ad agencies were everywhere, but there were very little to no PR agencies. So I'm like, why don't we bring Weber Shandwick over to the Middle East? And I used to work for Weber Shandwick in the US. And so I said, why don't we see if we can bring them over? And I had done communications. So I had been doing crisis communications, corporate communications, consumer communications. So I built 18 offices or 19 offices for Weber Shandwick, and actually ended up handling some of the biggest crises that happen in the Middle East, like through clients' work. Like if something bad happened and they needed a PR agency to help them, I was usually involved somehow in some way in helping that client get through the situation. Because I worked for Weber Shandwick, they were based in Dubai, and I was in Cairo, I kept on flying back and forth between Dubai and Cairo. And every time I took a flight, I saw the same guy on my flight. and he had a neck brace on. So it was a very obvious thing. I kept on seeing the guy in the neck brace on my flight to Cairo and my flight back and my flight to Dubai. So anyways, long story short, him and I got to know each other, and he worked at Google. And so then because we started talking, he's like, what do you do? I'm like, I work in communications, blah, blah, blah. Then they decided they were, going to beef up their teams in Dubai. So he put my name in the hat to like be the head of communications and public policy for Google in the Middle East. Like, how weird is it? I just kept on seeing this guy on a plane. And then we ended up getting to know each other. We met at a Bill Gates event. Bill Gates was coming to Egypt. We were at the airport flying from Dubai to Cairo. And then he's like, I'm going to the Bill Gates event. I'm like, I'm going to the Bill Gates event anyway. So that's how this whole thing started. And, I ended up, speaking to Google, they had reached me like in June, and I didn't accept the job till like January. But I accepted the job the day the revolution broke out in Egypt. So like the January 25th, when all the kind of Arab Spring was happening in Egypt is the day that I accepted the job. And I had interviewed for it, obviously, and talked to them at length and really understood kind of what the mission was that they were trying to achieve. And they were about to launch a bunch of fun products and really kind of deepen their engagement in the Middle East. And I really was excited about helping Google do that, and also helping users in the Middle East understand how to use Google's platforms and like have journalists learn how to embed videos and stories and use data and search. And so really wanted to give back to the community in terms of making sure people had access to information through Google's platform.
So you mentioned before that you helped Shanwick handle the biggest crisis in the Middle East. And I'm very curious to hear about that crisis. What was it about? What happened? Because that, I think, is going to give us some, deeper insights as to crisis management, reputation management, and what can happen out there and how we handle it as crisis experts, also in front, of the media. And that can be something very useful to hear from you.
Yeah, I think in terms of crisis management, it's about rapid response. And how are you ready for one? So I can't talk about specific clients, but I can tell you, I've worked with Netflix and Google and all these companies. One of the things that you need to think about, if you are a personal brand or you have a company, you need to think about worst case scenarios, because we live in real time, because we live in an era where if a bad thing happens, usually in the good old days, you'd have like a day to get your stuff together, to issue a statement, to talk to teams. It'll be on tomorrow's news. It'll be in tomorrow's papers. Now it doesn't work that way anymore. Now things happen in real time. Somebody publishes something. Everybody has the ability to broadcast everywhere at any time. You have to respond. You have to make sure you're responding the right way. So when I talk about crisis management, I always think about two things. One is rapid response. Make sure you don't take too long to respond, because everybody's watching. Everybody's watching what's happening, and everybody can see how long it's taking you to respond to a situation or a crisis. The second thing is on crisis management, besides rapid response, is empathy. People are too slow to say, I'm sorry, or, you know what, I made a mistake. Are you showing empathy? Are you really helping the situation to calm it down or to solve it by showing your empathy in a situation? So many of us could remember big stories like, I don't know, that guy that got dragged off the plane in United Airlines, and that wasn't the right thing. And then they just like took forever to say, I'm sorry. And they didn't even show any empathy, and they didn't apologize. And like everyone was wondering, like, what's taking so long? So thinking about how you respond is just as important as how fast you respond.
Is it also about preparation? Crisis can strike at any moment, and it could be internal or it can be external. So something that internally perhaps you could have predicted, or you could have expected, or you were expecting. But when it's something completely, generated from the external ecosystem, like for example the COVID-19 crisis. This is 100%. That no one was ever prepared for. So how can we best prepare for a crisis?
Yeah. The thing about preparing for a crisis is thinking it through. So right now we're in one right now with COVID and thinking about possibilities. So scenario plan. What would be some of the things that we might be faced as a company, and who and how will we solve it? So think about, what if this keeps going on for another year or two? What are some of the risks to our employees? What are the risks to our customers? What are the risks to our partners? What are the risks to our suppliers? Thinking through each of the different stakeholders or audiences that you work with is super, super important. Thinking about what would be our response to this situation. The other thing that we used to do at Google and Netflix, just taking out of the playbook, is we had statements ready in the drawer. We had, okay, if this situation happens, can we have some quick ready things ready to go in case something happens that we want to be prepared? Instead of thinking about what should we say in a crisis, how would we respond? Do we need to translate this into different languages? We were prepared. For example, what if in Egypt it happened, they turned off the internet and our customers can't get access to their Gmail or their Netflix or their services? What do we do? So we don't have to wait and think about what would we do in that situation. We scenario plan the whole thing down. What statement will we issue to the press? What would our tweet say? How are we going to talk to our customers? How will we communicate with them if we can't reach them through email, through the internet? Like, how are we going to use mobile phones? Like, we would think about all of those scenarios. Every company in the world that has a strong communications department is thinking through these steps. What is it that we need to do internally? And what is it that we need to do externally? And a lot of companies and people or personal brands think a lot about the external part and forget the internal piece. And my friends, what I always talk about is the importance of internal communications. They are your brand ambassadors. Your employees are your biggest cheerleaders. You're making sure that you tell your employees first before you tell the public. I worked with a company where they would make statements all the time to the public, and the employees were like, what? We just launched that? We didn't know. Nobody told us about that. Like, make sure you inform them. And you do it for multiple reasons. One is you want them to be obviously informed, but you also want them to be empowered. You want them to be bought in, because those employees have friends, have family, talk to other customers. They have their circles, like everyone relies on word of mouth. So why not make sure they're armed with all the information about what you're doing in case somebody at dinner says, hey, I heard your company did that. Why did you guys do that? Give them the information so that they have what they need to kind of speak on your behalf. The other thing of why internal communications, especially in a crisis, is so important, Elizabeth, is that it has to do with their social media accounts. So every employee has a social page, if on Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter. So they're going to get comments, they're going to get questions. If they're proud about the company or the company did something awesome, they're going to post about it. So you also want to make sure that you understand the power that people have by having a phone. It can be really, really impactful if you inform and educate your teams about what the company's doing it and what they're doing and why they're doing it.
Between Google and your current role, we have Netflix, correct?
Yes.
Talk to us about Netflix, because I think that, it made a major success. It kind of bridged, I think, for viewers, the link or the gap between factual documentaries and films and TV series. It provides content which is more quality content. What was your role with Netflix, and how did you approach it?
Yeah, so Netflix had been in the US, and one day they woke up and said, we're going to offer our services globally. So anyone in any market, they opened like 130 markets in one day. So my role was just to help them on the communications part. So I was an agency. By then I'd left Google and I had my own consulting firm. And so helped bring Netflix to the Middle East. Like, how do we communicate why Netflix is here? what content is available? How do we help the press understand about the company's corporate objectives, about the company's investment in content, about how the company's thinking about, you know, appealing to shows and culture that is relevant to the Middle East? I think one of the greatest things that Netflix did was, where we helped them do, is bring the shows and personalities and content that they love to life. All the favorite shows that people love, like, we wanted to bring it closer to the Middle East consumer. Right now, I mean, Netflix is doing a terrific job. I just saw that yesterday they announced their, I don't do their PR anymore, but that they're going to be having production content with a big Saudi company. They've added more Arabic content to the library. Like, my role with them was twofold. One is help them tell their story in the Middle East to consumers. And secondly, help them understand the Middle East market. What kind of content do we like? We like comedy. What kind of films do we like? How do we think about genres like sports and live sports? What are some of the things that, like, they had done a very popular like thriller in Arabic, and like, do we like that kind of content? Like, what are the types of Ramadan shows? Like, helping them understand the importance of Ramadan, where people get together every day and watch TV or YouTube or serials, and the whole culture of how people consume entertainment in the Middle East was a big thing that I really like wanted to be able to say, this is how I want to help you as a company learn more about the Middle East, our habits, our trends, and how we think about content, and libraries that we would like to see available. Like, Friends is a big deal. Like, is that available or not? That type of thing.
How do you compare mainstream media and social media? And do you think that currently the impact or the power of social media, which is really in the hands of the citizens, the people, or so we'd like to think, perhaps they're not, perhaps they are influenced too much by the private sector. How do you compare the two, and how do you see social media going forward? Do you think that they should be regulated more, for example?
We do live on social media and we do use it to communicate, but it's a free app. So we don't, you know, you don't have to use it. Like, you know, you don't have to be on it, but you want to be on it. But it does have its, you know, like anything else, like when we, you know, any other platform that we use, it always has, you know, it's tricky. It's tricky because should I not use it because I feel like they're tracking my information and they're taking all my stuff? Or do I really believe, what are they doing with this data? Like, are they taking everybody? I'm still trying to figure out how I feel about it. The movie was actually, there's a lot of things in there that I knew because I always worked at these tech companies. So I know kind of the challenges that they face, and they don't want to be regulating people's content, regulating people's information. But like, who does decide? Who does decide what's a good piece of content or what violates the rules? And so that's why a lot of them invest in these community guidelines. So it's hard. Like, I use social media. I'm not on Facebook, but I'm very active on Instagram. I'm very active on Twitter. And it is a dilemma. And it's a good conversation that everyone needs to make a decision for themselves on what they feel comfortable doing.
But when it comes to your current role, Chief Value Officer, I understand from, you know, our previous meeting a few weeks ago that you really, really love it. And perhaps for the first time in your career, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're working with a person. So the brand is the person. It's not a company. It's not a group of shareholders. How is it to work with someone who's a big brand himself?
Yeah. So I work for a company, but I also serve the CEO, and the CEO is a brand. And we think about, so Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary VEE, for those of you who don't know, is a CEO of a communications company that does advertising, digital marketing, communications, but is a brand in of himself. He's not a conventional CEO. He has built his career by letting a camera follow him around for years. And that not only keeps him honest, but also lets people see what is it really like to be an entrepreneur. You're working hard hours, you're flying in a lot of planes, you're juggling many hats. He's a motivational speaker. He's a 5-time best-selling author, and he is a brand. So people love, like, he's a CEO of a company who has throngs of fans. I brought him to Dubai, and it was like mobs, you know, people want to take pictures and selfies. He changes people's lives because he helps them understand what's the best way to be an entrepreneur, how to side hustle, how to build your business and brand by focusing on what matters. The reason why I was so attracted to working with him is his style is so different. And he leads with empathy and kindness on repeat, in doses, in heaps and loads. And he really thinks about, like, you don't got to be a bad guy to be a good business person. Like, you can be a super nice guy and love your people and show an enormous amount of empathy, an enormous amount of kindness. And it doesn't have to be political and cutthroat and all this kind of thing. To get to success, you can also be a super nice guy doing it. And he really believes in that. And the culture and the team and the people all live this philosophy. And it's just a spirit that's just, it's refreshing in today's world to be in that kind of environment where that has more weight than how many numbers did you close this week, or how many figures did you get for me? It's no, how many relationships did you make? Were you kind to everybody this week? Were you nice to people? Like, all of the things that nobody just teaches you to do that. Like, all the self-love, self-care things that they want you to be for yourself, they want you to be that for others.
You touched on a topic which currently we have been studying and working around and building, hopefully, some new theories or new ways to approach it. And I'm referring to kindness, because we have always been thinking about kindness as in good manners, as in niceness, as in courtesy. But what we have experienced with COVID-19, first of all, is this need for solidarity. Secondly, all of us are in more need of care, concern, and warmth from others. But also, we need people to help us become more resilient. So I would like to to invite your thoughts as to, how do you interpret kindness? Do you feel that kindness can take, perhaps a new role or a new priority in our lives as business leaders, as social impact leaders, and how?
Yeah, I think for me, reframing the conversation is around kindness is something that we really want to teach people is valuable. Like, how do we think about, like, COVID hit, and like, I kind of call it in my head the filtering process. Like, now I'm just filtering down what really matters. Humans matter, safety matters, kindness matters, taking care of your health matters. Like, what are the things about kindness that is resonating with us so much right now? It's not about being kind to other people. It's about being kind to yourselves. And I don't know why that resonated with me to, like, reframe the conversation with myself about how I think about these things.
How do you try to integrate and implement kindness in your day-to-day work? Do you have any specific actions? Do you just, because I know you and I know what a warm and supportive and great leader you are, but what is the way that you have incorporated kindness as far as your operational model as a professional goes?
For me, it's more about taking time and to slow down. Like, kindness for me, about how I've operated it or integrated into my work, is like slowing down to appreciate other people, slowing down to be kind to myself, sitting in front of Zoom every day, all day for 15, 16 hours, taking a break, making sure that I'm not just doing work all the time. So I'm finding time for myself. So the kindness that I'm injecting into my day starts with two things. One is, how do I make sure that I'm giving myself a break when I need it? And how do I take time to, like, not judge myself so much if, like, I didn't get everything done that I wanted to get today, but you know what? We're in a pandemic. We're going to do the best we can. We're going to try to just adjust and pivot and reinvent as much as I can.
So this time, this era is an era of confusion, and we are unable to predict, we are unable to foresee. We don't know what will happen in a week from now, a month from now, 6 months from now, let alone, in a year or two. Two questions here as we're entering the final part of this conversation, Maha. First of all, how have you prepared as an individual for the next few years in your life? Secondly, what is the biggest concern or the biggest ask that you come across when it comes, to other people that you work with, your boss or clients or partners? What are they most concerned about when it comes to their industries and the future?
Okay, so the first question, what I'm going to focus on in the next couple of years is, one, I continue to work on myself. Like, what are the things that I love to do? Make sure I'm focusing on doing the things that really feed my passions and energy. So I love to podcast. So I have a podcast I'm focusing on. I'd love over the next couple of years, I've been wanting to work on a book. I've started it and stopped it like 3 times. I really want to push through and get out a book about all the things that I've learned about doing communications and crisis and counsel to brands and personal brands and how companies can really, my mission in life is to help people communicate better. So I'd like to get all of that in a book. And then really figure out what's the biggest thing I can help create value for a company or an individual. Like, how can I help bring my skills and my talents to people who actually want it and need it? And so doing a lot of coaching and mentoring and driving value for Gary and his company, like that is super important to me. Like, I want to be very successful in this role and help businesses pivot during COVID and help them reach what they need to do. Back to my very first job, storytelling, journalism, news, it's the same thing. Storytelling through social, storytelling through the media. How do I help people tell their stories and amplify them more? So that's the first thing. And then the second question you asked me was, what do I see a lot of clients struggling with or needing help with, or what they really want to focus on? I think it's, with all the noise and all of the real-time nature of how we live, I think COVID has been good and has caused everyone to pause and reset. Like, we don't need to be doing all the things we were doing before. We realized, we can actually get by doing less. So now that there's more people spending time at home, cooking, exercising at home, doing what they're doing, they're also thinking about how to reach audiences and how to be relevant in conversation. So all the businesses we're talking to, it's like, how to be better on social, how to be better on digital, how do we do direct to consumer, how do we build our e-commerce business, how do we end up doing last mile logistics to deliver things to customers. So helping, because of COVID, customers and brands understand how to do digital and how to be very good at it efficiently is something that I'm doing a lot. That's my day-to-day, and I love it, because I think if we can help businesses understand how to operate in this framework that is here to stay, we're going to be helping a lot of people do good and give them an economic opportunity they didn't have before.
What is your advice to aspiring entrepreneurs today? Because, of course, young entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs, they struggle with, first of all, finances. Secondly, how do you brand? How do you create, unique identity for your product or service? How do you make yourself known? How do you market yourself? So what are the priorities? Based on your experience and your expertise, what is it that you would say to an aspiring, talented, ambitious, passionate entrepreneur to do?
Entrepreneurs, to be, consistent in their businesses and to be building something they actually want to help see grow, is you have to find something that you're passionate about and you can do on repeat. So even when people come to create content and they want to build their personal brand, we talk a lot about, like, what is it that you love to do that you think you can do over and over again? I think for entrepreneurs, don't be afraid to walk away from an idea that's not working. Don't be afraid to walk away from an idea that doesn't have the legs that you think it could do for longevity. And so thinking about an entrepreneurship mindset is thinking about tapping into that passion point that you have grit to stick through it, up and down, in and out, through thick and thin. And I think that's one of the differences between entrepreneurs that make it and entrepreneurs that don't, is that they're really either get an idea and are married to it and are afraid to say it's failing and don't want to step away from it, or don't think big enough to push themselves to the boundaries of where their passion might be able to take them.
How can we communicate this notion of it's not about the shareholders anymore? It is about profit making, yes, because we need healthy companies, because healthy companies can provide, jobs, and they can support our economies and our prosperity, and, very important for our societies. But this is a world that needs to take into account the wider stakeholder ecosystem. So how me as a company, I affect the lives, not only of, my employees, of course, very important, but also the society that I operate in, or other partners, or the families of my employees. What is your take around, this idea of accountability?
Yeah, so I think, working from home, not seeing your employees all day, is a massive case study in accountability. So how, I had a manager that was telling us, like, performance is the key to independence. Like, if you want to kind of run your own thing and manage your own schedule, you have to perform. The same thing goes with accountability. You can have unlimited freedom, but then you have unlimited accountability. You have to be accountable to your results and your objectives. So like, your manager doesn't see what you're doing all day because you're working from home, but you're accountable to making sure that you get it done. I don't care if you start at 4 a.m. and finish at noon, but you're accountable to getting those results. So having that personal accountability that, like, I do want to take responsibility for what I'm accountable for, but I also hold other people accountable. Like, not being able to get away with not doing what you're supposed to be doing, and making sure we're holding each other accountable to achieve what we're supposed to be achieving. So I think, accountability and freedom are kind of two things that I always think about hand in hand.
As a last question, I wanted to ask you if you have, first of all, a role model, someone, that you look up, or she could be a public figure, she could be a family member, or he, I don't want to define, gender. And what is a message that you want to give to other women when it comes to pursuing their passion, their career, their life's purpose?
Yeah. So first of all, my role model is my sister. She's my older sister. She is a mom of 2. She is a working woman. She's somebody who I look up to and admire greatly. And she's always been for me since I was a little girl. So that has been a constant in my life. Secondly, I think, believing in yourself and believing that you can do something is the greatest power that we have from within us. And a lot of times we talk negatively to ourselves, like, it's not going to work, I can't do it, I'm afraid. Fear is usually in the way. The person that's usually holding us back is us. And really giving each other a dose of believing that you can do something and that you can try something and you can achieve something. It's on the other side of that fear, and really pushing through to try something. And even if you're afraid and it doesn't work out, then at least you tried it, right? The regret of not trying it or not trying to achieve it. So I always talk about, like, what can I do to help you achieve what you want to get done? What can I do to help you believe in yourself more? Because you're probably capable more than you ever thought. Like, who thought that the world could completely operate with, no issues? Companies, deliveries, like, you figure it out. You get forced into a situation, you figure it out. And you also should believe in yourself to figure it out. If there's something you always wanted to do, you always wanted to try, believe in yourself to get it done, because you will figure it out.